take to be the most watched newscast in America?
We are part of an operation.
Is this our combat operations center?
We're approaching the gate. Militants came in from different directions.
Nuclear reactor.
So you have a couple loaded and ready to go. The house is destroyed, but the flag.
Not a tear in it.
How important it made the USA. Great work.
Hi. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Ismail? David.
I'm David Muir.
I know who you are.
You
Watch
do?
you every night.
ABC's World News Tonight with David Muir is America's most watched newscast. ABC News, America's #1 news source.
Welcome back to ABC News Live. First, I'm Diane Macedo, and we have breaking news. The Lebanese Red Cross says it's responding to multiple explosions in Lebanon. Here's a look at Beirut, where the Lebanese Ministry of Public Health says large numbers of people have been injured. They say preliminary information indicates, quote, the injuries were related to the explosion of wireless devices. A Hezbollah-owned Lebanese media outlet also reports, quote, pager devices exploded in the hands of their owners in a number of Lebanese regions. Let's bring in foreign correspondent Tom Southey-Burridge now, along with ABC News contributor, former senior CIA field operative Daryl Blocker for more. Tom, the Lebanese Red Cross says it's deploying more than 30 ambulances to help treat and evacuate people who were wounded. What's the latest?
Yeah, Diane, this is clearly an evolving situation. We're getting information in real time, but at the moment we know from Lebanon's health ministry that hundreds of people have been injured in an apparent well-coordinated and what looks like a very sophisticated attack. Lebanese officials are saying that pager devices, remember, those are devices that can only receive and send messages, not calls, have exploded in the hands of some members of the Hezbollah group. Remember that militant group based in Lebanon, backed by Iran. We're seeing reports of multiple explosions in multiple regions of Lebanon. We're seeing hospitals in Lebanon now on high alert. Basically launching a widespread operation to deal with the aftermath of this attack, with hundreds of people injured. We don't have reports of people being killed at this stage, but Iranian state TV is saying that one of the victims is Iran's ambassador to Lebanon, so that's highly significant. At this stage, we have no indication or confirmation, at least, of who was responsible, but the suspicion, the finger of suspicion, quite clearly will be pointed towards Israel. Israeli officials have said absolutely nothing about this attack at this stage. That is the way that Israel handles any type of attack like this around the region. But, you know, I think, you know, given the highly sophisticated nature of this attack, the way it's been well coordinated, we're seeing video confirming these reports of pagers, these pager devices exploding in the hands of people, causing multiple injuries across Lebanon. Given that sophisticated nature of the attack, clearly it is likely that most people in the region and beyond will point the finger of suspicion at Israel.
Daryl, the Lebanese Ministry of Public Health is now asking citizens who own pagers to throw them away immediately. And back in February, a Hezbollah leader urged members to stop using mobile phones, calling them a deadly agent. Hi, I'm Diane Macedo. We have breaking news. U.S. attorneys for the Southern District of New York are set to officially announce federal indictment against Sean Diddy Combs. Federal prosecutors say the music mogul has been charged with racketeering conspiracy. They say he ran an enterprise that was involved in sex trafficking, kidnapping, forced labor, and several other charges. We are now awaiting the official details behind that indictment. Let's listen in.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Damian Williams, and I'm the U.S. Attorney here in the Southern District of New York. Today, I'm announcing the unsealing of a 3-count indictment, charging Sean Combs with racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking, interstate transportation for prostitution. The indictment alleges that between at least 2008 and the present, Combs abused, threatened, and coerced victims to fulfill his sexual desires, protect his reputation, and conceal his conduct. As alleged in the indictment, to carry out this conduct, Sean Combs led and participated in a racketeering conspiracy that used the business empire he controlled to carry out criminal activity, including sex trafficking, forced labor, kidnapping, arson, bribery, and the obstruction of justice. Let me say a little bit more about the charges. The indictment alleges that Combs abused and exploited women and other people for years, and in a variety of ways. As alleged, Combs used force, threats of force, and coercion to cause victims to engage in extended sexual performances with male commercial sex workers, some of whom he transported or caused to be transported over state lines. Combs allegedly planned and controlled the sex performances, which he called freak-offs, and he often electronically recorded them. The freak-offs sometimes lasted days at a time, involved multiple commercial sex workers, and often involved a variety of narcotics, such as ketamine, ecstasy, and GHB, which Combs distributed to the victims to keep them obedient and compliant. As alleged, when Combs didn't get his way, he was violent, and he subjected victims to physical, emotional, and verbal abuse so that they would participate in the freak-offs, and that Combs hit, kicked, threw objects at, and dragged victims, at times by their hair. On one occasion in March of 2016, that conduct was captured on video and later reported in the media. Specifically, Combs kicked, dragged, and threw a vase at a victim in a Los Angeles hotel when the victim was attempting to flee. As alleged, these assaults often resulted in injuries to the victims, which took days or weeks to heal. In addition to the violence, the indictment alleges that Combs threatened and coerced victims to get them to participate in the freak-offs. He used the embarrassing and sensitive recordings he made of the freak-offs as collateral against the victims. And the indictment alleges that he maintained control over the victims in several ways, including by giving them drugs, by giving and threatening to take away financial support or housing, by promising them career opportunities, by monitoring their whereabouts, and even by dictating their physical appearance. Because of all of this, the indictment alleges that the victims did not believe they could refuse Combs without risking their security or facing more abuse. The indictment also alleges other acts of violence undertaken by Combs and others, including violence against witnesses to his abuse, kidnapping, and arson. The indictment alleges that on more than one occasion, Combs carried or brandished firearms to intimidate and threaten victims and witnesses. Now, Combs did not do this all on his own. As I mentioned, Combs has been charged with RICO conspiracy. He used his business and employees of that business and other close associates to get his way. Those individuals allegedly included high-ranking supervisors in the business, personal assistants, security staff, and household staff. The indictment alleges that those individuals facilitated the freak-offs. They booked the hotel rooms and stocked them with the supplies, including drugs, baby oil, personal lubricant, extra linens, and lighting. When the hotel rooms got damaged, they helped clean it up. They arranged for victims and commercial sex workers to travel for the freak-offs, and they delivered large quantities of cash to Combs to pay for the commercial sex workers. The indictment also alleges that they helped Combs cover up his crimes. During the March 2016 incident at the LA hotel that I mentioned earlier, a member of the hotel security staff intervened, and Combs attempted to bribe the staff member with a stack of cash to make sure that what happened was kept quiet. And as the indictment alleges, in late 2023, after public allegations were made about Combs' crimes, he and others pressured witnesses and victims to stay silent, including by making phone calls to witnesses and victims and giving them a false narrative of what they had experienced. And as alleged, Combs used others to help conceal his abuse by monitoring and preventing victims from leaving a location in order to hide their injuries, or by locating and contacting a victim who had attempted to flee. As part of this investigation, in March of this year, special agents from HSI executed search warrants at Combs' residences in Miami and Los Angeles. They also executed a warrant for Combs' electronic devices. During those searches, agents seized evidence of the crimes charged in this indictment. They seized firearms and ammunition, including 3 defaced AR-15s and a large-capacity drum magazine. They also seized evidence of the freak-offs, electronic devices that contain images and videos of the freak-offs with multiple victims. and they seized cases and cases of the kinds of personal lubricant and baby oil that Combs' staff allegedly used to stock hotel rooms for the freak-offs, more than 1,000 bottles altogether. Here are some of the items that we recovered during the searches. As you can see here, this is a drum magazine, large capacity, and it contains, I believe, 59 rounds. I mentioned as well we recovered 3 AR-15s. This is a close-up shot of one of the AR-15s, and you can see right here the serial number has been thoroughly defaced. Another picture of more ammunition and parts of 2 AR-15s right there. Now, I want to be clear about 2 things. First, this office is determined to investigate and prosecute anyone who engages in sex trafficking, no matter how powerful or wealthy or famous you may be. No one should doubt our commitment on that. A year ago, Sean Combs stood in Times Square and was handed a key to New York City. Today, he's been indicted and will face justice in the Southern District of New York. Second, we are not done. This investigation is ongoing, and I encourage anyone with information about this case to come forward and to do it quickly. Anyone with information can call 1-877-4HSI-TIP. I want to express my deep appreciation for the victims and witnesses who have used their voices and helped bring this criminal conduct to light. We would not be here without them. I also want to thank the dedicated case agents on the HSI Trafficking in Person Squad in New York. They have been with us since day one and have worked tirelessly on this investigation. They will continue to be invaluable partners to us. I also want to thank the incredible agents and analysts from SCNY who have also provided tremendous assistance on this case. I'm deeply grateful for their continued work. And finally, I want to thank the outstanding career prosecutors from SCNY who are handling this case. Meredith Foster, Emily Johnson, Chrissy Slavic, Madison Smizer, and Mitzi Steiner, and their supervisors, Jamie Backleapter and Jacqueline Kelly. They are members of the Civil Rights Unit in our criminal division. We created the Civil Rights Unit when I became U.S. Attorney. I am deeply proud of their work on this and so many other cases. I'll now take some questions.
Aaron Katursky, ABC.
Thanks, Nick. Damian, thanks. The indictment, open, violent, hedonistic abuse that you say was recurrent and widely known. Why did it take law enforcement so long to intervene? How many women were victimized by Sean Combs, and how many others were involved?
Look, our investigation is ongoing. We are committed to bringing justice to everyone who's been victimized by the defendant. I can't tell you why it took so long. I think the better focus is on the fact that we are here today. And we are committed to making sure that justice is done. Next question.
Thank you, NBC. Leah Ainsley, NBC.
Thank you for doing this. You said we are not done and that Combs did not do this alone. Do you foresee that there could be other charges related to this case?
I'm not taking anything off the table.
Janet Fisher, Newsday.
Yeah. What's the difference between the sex trafficking and promoting travel for the purpose of prostitution?
Well, there are different crimes with different elements. I don't think we should get into the nitty-gritty of the legal discussion right now, but the sex trafficking, we believe, they're all serious offenses, but the sex trafficking conduct carries some significant penalties, and we are gratified that we were able to bring that charge.
One more coercive than the other?
I'm not going to be able to get into that, but you can look it up, and yes, sex trafficking, especially when it involves coercion or force, is a very serious crime, and it carries significant penalties.
Good afternoon, Darla Miles, ABC 7 New York. Thank you for this press conference and for the details. 2 questions. In context of this indictment and the information that was presented to the grand jury, are you able to clarify the number of victims? It's mentioned plural in the indictment, but can you specify the number of victims just for this particular indictment? And secondly, can you provide details about the alleged arson?
Unfortunately, I'm not able to provide either. The number of victims, you are correct. We are intentional in saying multiple. The details of the arson incident are limited to what we have in the indictment and also the detention letter that we filed, which contains more details than the indictment does at various points. But we don't have anything more beyond that. Next question.
Lynn Tran, CNN.
Are any of his accomplices or associates under investigation? And additionally, could he face any more charges?
So the investigation is ongoing. That means both as to him and to anyone else who we believe committed the crime with him. Next question.
Juliet Papa.
Hi, good morning from 1010 Wins. Any indication that some of the women or victims here were imprisoned in his residences, and did he have locations where he kept them, and they were not allowed to leave? And also, he's indicted here, although there were searches and raids in LA, Miami. Why in New York?
Well, I'm biased. I'm the U.S. Attorney in the Southern District of New York. I think that we have an outstanding track record of bringing some of the most impactful, sprawling, complex, difficult sex trafficking, human trafficking, labor trafficking, you name it. The Southern District of New York can do it, and so we're very proud of that. And so the scope and complexity of this investigation isn't something that we ran from. It's something that we embrace, and we will continue to do that. As to your question about whether he imprisoned anyone, all I can say is that, I mentioned this March 2016 incident where something was caught on video where a victim was attempting to flee, and there was violence that was associated with it.
Was that at the residence or a hotel?
That was at a hotel.
Matthew Lee, Inner City Press.
Sure. Thanks a lot. Does your office intend to seek remand, or are you reaching a bail package? And if you're willing, how would you contrast this with the R. Kelly case in EDNY in terms of the elements? Thanks.
So we will be seeking detention. We have filed a letter laying out our reasoning for seeking pretrial detention. I'm not going to be able to expand beyond what's in the letter, but it contains all of the reasoning, and it contains the law as well. There is a presumption of detention in a case like this, and we think that's warranted.
Thank you. John Anise, New York Daily News.
Thank you. I was hoping to get some more detail about the searches of his residence, the guns, the cases of lubricant, and the videos. Where were they found amongst his residence? Were they all scattered around the houses in one place? I kind of wanted to just get a better picture of how that stuff was found.
Well, look, I think that some of the details that you're seeking are in the detention letter. So, for instance, some of the AR-15s, 2 of the 3 defaced AR-15s were found in his bedroom closet in Miami, broken down into parts, along with magazines, with ammunition loaded in them. So some of that detail is in the detention letter. Beyond that, I'm not going to be able to get into where other items were stored.
Ben Kochman, Post.
Hey, thanks for doing this. Your office was the office that had been prosecuting Jeffrey Epstein before he died in custody. I have not read your detention memo yet. It's the first thing I'm going to do after this ends. But does the memo address, or is your office concerned with Combs' safety in custody, given what happened with Epstein?
So we are concerned with anyone's safety whenever they are detained prior to trial. It's part of our obligations to keep people safe as well. It's part of the criminal justice system. So, but I do not draw any sort of connection between Jeffrey Epstein's suicide and what may or may not happen to any other defendant while they are detained pretrial. And of course, the decision whether to detain the defendant will be up to a judge. Our position is that pretrial detention is warranted under the law and based on the facts of this case, and I'll leave it at that.
Are some of the prosecutors on this case some of the same prosecutors that had been handling that or that worked on the Maxwell case?
So I'm not going to get into the staffing. I will say that this team, this group of AUSAs, this incredible group has been working on this case around the clock, and they've had their hands full. Next question.
Gus Rosendale, NBC News.
Good morning, sir. Combs' attorney said that his client has been cooperative with investigators. He said that this morning. I was wondering if you would have a reaction to that.
Let me just say this. I think that generally with increasing frequency, the word cooperative or cooperating has taken on tremendous elasticity, and it no longer really bears any relation to what the word means when we use it in a very specific context. So responding to lawful process and the like does not qualify as cooperation when we use that term here.
Mike Sisak, AP.
Thanks. To that end, was there any discussion of Mr. Combs surrendering? I understand he was taken into custody at a hotel in Manhattan last night, and maybe that wasn't the plan. Can you elaborate on how that came about and why that was?
I'm not going to be able to get into any sort of operational details as to how he was taken into custody and when. He is in custody right now. He will be appearing in court later today.
Was there any discussion of him surrendering, given they claim he's cooperating?
I'm not going to be able to get into law enforcement tactics or operations.
I mean, you make a big deal of the guns, but how come they're not charged outright or with obliterating serial numbers? That's automatic time.
Well, I can't get into the charging decision. It is very meaningful to us that weapons were possessed, as we allege in the indictment. Part of the reason why this conduct was so pervasive and harmful was because victims and others didn't necessarily feel comfortable denying him his wishes, as we allege, because of the presence of firearms. I should leave it there.
Thanks. Last question, Jacob Shamison.
Jacob Shamsian, Business Insider. Thank you. Given that he's the sole defendant in this case and that you allege he's part of a conspiracy that involves members of his companies, do you anticipate a superseding indictment that bring allegations against other members of his companies or other co-conspirators as well?
I can't take anything off the table. Anything is possible. Our investigation is very active and ongoing. And I think a lot of you who cover this office know that when we say such things, that developments are certainly foreseeable, but I cannot predict them sitting here today. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. What part of his business empire is exposed before Richard?
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
We've been listening there to the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York formally announcing the unsealing of an indictment charging Sean Diddy Combs. Combs is now facing charges of racketeering, conspiracy, sex trafficking, and transportation to engage in prostitution. He's accused of running a criminal enterprise that engaged in sex trafficking, forced labor, kidnapping, arson, bribery, and obstruction of justice, among other crimes. Now prosecutors are detailing more behind those accusations, saying Diddy was known for arranging what he called freak-offs, sometimes multi-day events where multiple sex workers were given drugs to elicit their compliance or sometimes beaten into compliance. They also say victims were often monitored and prevented from leaving their location in order to hide their injuries. The U.S. attorneys are also laying out here some of what was found when raiding Diddy's homes. They say they found several guns and thousands of bottles of baby oil and lubricant. Diddy has vehemently denied previous allegations of sex abuse and trafficking. And let's bring in ABC's Phil Lipoff and ABC News legal contributor Brian Buckmeyer for more on this. Phil, we've heard a certain level of these accusations before in these 11 civil lawsuits that Diddy's faced over the course of the past year or so, but this goes far beyond.
Right, and we now have details of these things, and you just mentioned these freak-offs that could go for days. That's Diddy's word, I guess, these freak-offs. And people would be, according to the indictment, sometimes forced into doing these things. One part of the indictment says this was a pattern of abuse. Combs manipulated women to participate in highly orchestrated performances of sexual activity with male commercial sex workers, and a lot of these people had been transported, I guess the allegation is, across state lines. And part of this allegation, they say that they not only found these two broken down AR-15s and this drum-sized magazine that had 59 rounds in it in Miami, but they also found like 1,000, I think they said 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lubricant, which were, as they said, widely known to be used at these freak-offs.
Yeah, and Brian, it's not just Diddy being implicated here. They're saying this was an entire operation. He had senior leaders helping to run this thing, assistants and other lower-level employees working all of the logistics for these events. What do you make of that?
Yes, it's very similar to, I know a lot of people will be talking about R. Kelly. R. Kelly happened in the Eastern District of New York. That's in Brooklyn, and the SDNY being in Manhattan. There are some similarities. An enterprise like this doesn't operate with just one person. Sean Combs can't run Bad Boys Entertainment and still have allegedly male escorts being flown in and making sure that there are drugs and that there are cleanup and a setup of all of this. There has to be individuals in an enterprise like this that's not only going to provide the drugs and the people, as we saw in Rodney Jones's lawsuit, as well as Cassie's, and even more recently in Don Richard's, as to how this environment was created to kind of funnel this sexual abuse at the behest and at the pleasure of Sean Combs, as this indictment alleges. What I make of it is, there are going to be a lot of people who are going to get deals as to why they're not going to get prosecuted so they can testify against Sean Combs. The person who comes in and picks up the sex worker, so to speak, from the airport and brings them to the hotel. The person who then cleans up all this baby oil and mess after the fact, knowing what occurred. And then people who just continually promulgate this, that's all going to be a part of this investigation.
In terms of the charges themselves, it's a little confusing, or it can be anyway, because he's facing 3 charges. But you're saying in that racketeering conspiracy is where you get all these underlying accusations of kidnapping and so on. Can you just explain how that part of it works?
Yeah, so if you ask me the question, Brian, how many charges is Sean Combs facing, I would say 3. He's got the RICO conspiracy charge, the sex trafficking, and transporting people for the purpose of prostitution. But within that RICO, what we're talking about is a criminal enterprise, and that criminal enterprise is both a music industry and one that commits crimes. And the governor here is saying they're so intertwined that some of those criminal enterprises consist of kidnapping in California, arson in California, bribery in California. And I say specifically in California because I say that these acts can be penalized under the California statute. I know a lot of people are trying to get bits and pieces and say, what is this? Well, if you look at Cassie's lawsuit and even the video, perhaps her being assaulted and dragged through the halls of that hotel, as was mentioned here, that could be the kidnapping they're referring to. The allegations of Sean Combs supposedly blowing up Kid Cudi's car in California, that can be a part of the arson that would fit in with a RICO. And then, of course, the federal charges of witness tampering, forced labor, sex trafficking, possession with the intent to distribute, obstruction of justice, that would fall under the RICO, but are still crimes in and of themselves.
Phil, you can't overstate the fall from grace. We heard the U.S. attorney say right there, a year ago, Diddy was in Times Square receiving the keys to the city.
Right.
And now here they are announcing this indictment against him.
That key has been taken back, and there was a Diddy Day in Miami that has been taken back, and he's lost connections to a lot of the folks that he has had connections to in terms of brands and things of that nature. He has been this global icon, he has been an enterprise in a lot of ways. He found other artists and brought them up, and everybody wanted to live in that sphere for 30 years now. I mean, alcohol brand, he has a clothing brand, you name it, he's got it. And there is a lot at risk, not only financially for him, but I mean, he could spend the rest of his life in prison if convicted.
And prosecutors are now saying he used that influence as part of this. It wasn't just physical confinement and you can't leave the space, and I'm monitoring your location, but also I'm promising you the future, a music career, other things along those lines, and if you betray me, you won't have that. You will be destroying your future. That's what prosecutors are alleging.
And not just if you betray me, but threats and violence to not betray me.
Yeah, things of I can make you disappear, with certain allegations of that, are shelving people's music industries.
All right, Phil Lipoff, Brian Buckmeyer, thank you. The news never stops, and neither do we. We will have more news at the top of the hour. Stay with us.
What does it take to be the most watched newscast in America?
We are part of an operation.
Is this our combat operations center?
We're approaching the gate. Militants came in from different directions. Nuclear reactor. So you have a couple loaded and ready to go. The house is destroyed, but the flag... Not a carry